the death penalty is another political agenda.
Ohio fails to meet 93% of the guidelines set forth to ensure fairness and accuracy in a capital punishment system.
I guess being innocent is a technicality.
The regular public do not know that it costs more to execute someone.
From a statistical standpoint, that we absolutely have executed innocent people.
Well, since then, it has been determined that that was faulty science.
My story actually begins with a Sunday morning on June 7th, 1998. Our house was bombarded with police officers and the SWAT team. Didn't know what was going on. My husband was outside. My oldest son was outside. And my youngest son and myself were inside. And the deputies rushed in the door and began asking me questions and actually making my son and I go outside onto our porch. And he began by asking me what my mother's name was, and when I told him my mother's name, the deputy kind of went gray, and he's informed me that my mother had been murdered and my 6-year-old niece had been raped and brutalized, and was then saying that it was her uncle, my husband at the time, that was the one who did it. When the verdict came down, I kind of knew in my heart that it was bad. I had seen a couple of the jurors walk in, and they looked at Clarence like he was, the lowest trash on the street. But in my head, I'm thinking, in your heart, you don't think sensibly. You just feel the moment. But in my head, I'm thinking, now come on. There's no physical evidence, blah, 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 blah. There's no way they're going to find him guilty, And going in, when the jurors went in to deliberate, we were told that it was all or nothing. If Clarence was found guilty of aggravated murder, then he would be guilty of all the rest. If they say that he was not guilty of aggravated murder, then he could not be guilty of the other charges. Okay? So we're thinking, okay, it's all or nothing. So when the judge first read the verdict, it was not guilty on aggravated murder. And we're like, yes! In the next instant, the judge says, I am not finished. Order in the court, I'm not finished. And we're all looking at one another like, what? Here they rewrote the indictment to include a lesser charge of murder so that they could find him guilty of everything else under the statute of aggravated murder. And the judge kept saying guilty to the charge of guilty. And I was just floored. What led me to suspecting Earl Mann in the first place was the fact that my niece had gotten up that morning and had went to the neighbor's house for help. And this woman left her on the porch for 45 minutes without calling the police or calling an ambulance or checking on my mother. She's in the house for 45 minutes. Doesn't let Brooke in. This is a 6-year-old child that's, battered, bloody, and decides to put her in her car and take my niece home to my sister's house. And I tell the director of the Innocence Project, I really think it is this guy. And, I have to do something. So I started writing Earl Mann letters in prison, hoping that he would lick the envelope and send it back to me and I'd have his DNA done. Well, that never came about. I don't know why. I think maybe he suspected something. I think at one point he was in one prison and then he was transferred to Mansfield. And that's where Clarence was incarcerated. So I told Clarence, I said, the best piece of evidence that you could get would be a cigarette butt. He has the opportunity to pick up a cigarette butt from Earl Mann and kind of kept it hidden in his Bible for a couple weeks. I was at work one day, got a call from the attorney, and the cigarette butt from Earl Mann matched the crime scene evidence. Summit County Prosecutor's Office beat us to that press conference and had one of their own and announced that they were dropping all charges against Clarence and releasing him from prison. Earl Mann, was finally charged and was facing the death penalty. That really put me on the fence because, on one hand, what he did to my mother was he was a monster. And the things that he did to my niece were monstrous. And in my mind, I was thinking, he did this, and he did this, and it's incomprehensible. And, should he die? And I'd have to say it a couple times, I did think that maybe he should. And I really wrestled with that fact. And then I come to the conclusion that I could not set a standard for one person and then have a different set of standards for another person. The state is saying you can't murder someone, you can't murder and rape someone. If you do, we're going to murder you. And that, to me, the double standard there, that's not a deterrent to criminals, to murderers. And it's been proven in a lot of studies that most people who commit murders and heinous crimes never think they're going to be caught. So they're not deterred from the death penalty. I think that the death penalty is another political agenda that the state has. We're tough on crime. You do this, this is what's going to happen. And then when it all boils down to, they're going to put this guy to death. They use it, to comfort the families. They say, we're going to put this man to death, and you're going to, all your troubles will be gone. All your thoughts about this case, you'll have closure then. Families don't, until later on, families don't realize that the death penalty goes on for 10, 15, sometimes 20 years in appeals. And it's constantly brought back up to the family. The family goes through the appeal process just as much as the inmate goes through the appeal process. And I think that the state uses this death penalty as a money saver. They're saying that, we can't afford to keep inmates in prison for life without some stipulation because we can't afford to keep them in there. Well, the regular public do not know that it costs more to execute someone than it is to keep them in there the rest of their life. What good is this doing? You know, this is punishing that person, but it's really not becoming what the state is wanting it to become. A deterrent, a money saver, a closure for the family. It's not doing that.